Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here. This is the coolest venue I've ever been at. So I'm just looking at the lights, and way cooler than either of us. So it's really a joy to help or be a part of the celebration of the launch of this center. I feel like it's been a long time coming, knowing Michael, but also not a moment too soon. As mentioned, my name is Snyder. I'm the editor of a magazine that, if you're interested, you can find on one of the tables outside of this hall called Comment Magazine. Our tagline is Public Theology for the Common Good. And I'm really just delighted you've already gotten to know Matt and his contagious hope as president of Hope College. But I'm just really delighted to get to tease out a little bit more of what he's actually doing in this institution and sector of higher ed, which I think is as beleaguered as any out there in kind of our fraught civic public landscape. So Matt and I first met just as Comment, serendipitously, maybe providentially, was in the midst of creating a print issue. We have a quarterly life cycle on this, what we decided to call the gift logic, or the gift economy. We just got kind of curious about the animating practices of those communities, institutions, and individuals who just operate out of a sense of fundamental abundance, that operate out of a sense that gift may be actually at the heart of our reality as creatures, not self-preservation or survival first. And we just wanted to know whether such a logic, such an economy of trust and generosity might be possible in large scale, kind of a yeast spreading through the whole dough kind of way. And as my team and I were commissioning authors of a more cerebral cast of mind on this from a variety of angles, I met Matt Scogin here, and he was putting this notion of gift into practice in a very bold way at a pretty significant level of scale, a pretty significant institution of learning. So we're going to tease out how exactly you're doing this, Matt, and what exactly a gift economy might have to do with leavening our stuck, if not increasingly sour, American meritocracy. But I just want to say that when you are a lowly writer and observer like me, you're just often seeking to put language to the practice and working philosophy of common good, redemptive actors working in the trenches of a given sector or civil sphere. And when you're doing that, there is just no greater joy or encouragement than watching someone count the cost of that philosophy and test it in real time. And as they do so, kind of discover what I think of as like the further up and further in genius of what you might call like the deeper magic of God's creational design. So Matt really has a baptized imagination, and he's committed to applying it to address a very real challenge, that of American higher education's broken business model. So Matt, it's just really excited to tease this out. So I just want to know, what are you doing that is so radical and new, and what is it called, and how did this idea come to you of Hope Forward?
And thanks very much. First of all, I'm back. It's somewhat awkward to be in two conversations back to back, but here I am. You're stuck with me again for a few more minutes. And thanks so much. By the way, if you don't know Comment Magazine, it is stunning. It is stunning, and every article is amazing, but if you read Anne's, the beginning of every issue has a column by Anne, which will make anyone who wants to try to be a communicator totally jealous, because her writing is beautiful and amazing. So as Anne said, she and I met just as we were we at Hope College were in the very early stages of reimagining how students can fund their college education. And just as we were starting to launch this idea called Hope Forward, this gift economy issue or gift logic issue of Comment Magazine came out. So we sort of became partners in the idea that maybe, just maybe, what Jesus talks about can actually be applied to societal problems. So what we're working on at Hope College, we call this Hope Forward, which, as I mentioned, is a way to totally reimagine how students can pay for college. We call it Hope Forward because it's basically a pay-it-forward vision for funding your college education. It's based almost entirely on one verse in Matthew. It's Matthew 10:8, where Jesus says, "Freely you have received, now freely give." And we spent, as I mentioned on the last conversation, I've been president of Hope for 5 years. I had worked on Wall Street for 11 years before this job. I had never worked at higher education before. The board hired me to come in and think differently about the business model of higher education, and we spent a couple of years rolling around in what's really broken and what can we do about it. And we landed on that verse, and we sort of had this holy cow moment, like what if we actually applied what Jesus talks about, not just to our personal lives, but to our structures and to our business model. So the whole idea is, what if students, rather than paying for their college up front through tuition and debt, what if we just gave it to them? And then in return, students signed a covenant, and what they agreed to in the covenant is to give something to Hope every year for the rest of their lives after they graduate. So it's taking that verse literally, freely you have received, now freely give, and that's what we're doing. We're giving our students their education up front. They're signing a covenant, and in that covenant they agree to give something every year for the rest of their lives. We talk about with our students. So this is we have 3,400 students at Hope. Eventually, our ambition is to have all of our students on this model. We decided to go ahead and start because it will take some. The transition is very difficult to move from a tuition-based system to this gift-based system. So while we're working on that transition, we decided to go ahead and start with a small group of students. So we have about 85 students who are helping us pilot this idea right now. They're actual students who are alive and well at Hope College.
Thanks, Matt. So we'll get into the challenges a little bit, but let's start with all the things you've discovered along the way. Like, you had this bold idea, you presented it to the board, they hired you anyways to be president, even if it sounded wild.
Yeah, that's right.
What has wound up being among some of the more just delicious discoveries as you've leaned in to trust that this might actually work over the long haul? What have you discovered about the nature of community, healthy institutions, et cetera?
Yeah, man, we are learning so much, and it's been beautiful so far. So we have one of our professors, his name is Daryl Van Tongeren. He's a psychology professor. We pulled him off of teaching for now, and his full-time job is to analyze this Hope Forward pilot to see what we can learn as we move through this. So he's studying 5 big things. First is access. Like, the question is this indeed moving the needle on access? Second is generosity. Obviously, it will be some time until we have data on what these students are giving, because the oldest students are juniors at Hope, so we're in our 3rd year of piloting this. So it will be some time until we have data on giving. But here's what we've learned so far, which is stunning, and this backs up what the research says. So, everybody's worried about, is our country becoming less generous? Is our country becoming, are we losing a sense of gratitude? What the research says is that the best way to spur on an attitude of gratitude, sorry for the rhyme, to spur on gratitude, the best way to do it is to simply give someone a gift. So, like, Anna, if I give you a gift because you're a nice person, your immediate response is going to be, that's so nice, I should give Matt a gift back. And that's how that's kind of our initial instinct as humans. And that's what we've done. Again, freely you've received. So the first part of that verse is you have to receive a gift. And then after you receive that gift, it ought to make you someone who wants to be generous in return. So even though it will be some time till we have real data on giving and generosity, what we're seeing so far is that these students have been transformed by that, and they're thinking differently about the kind of impact they can have they've committed to living a lifetime of generosity, and these are 18-year-olds, and they're asking questions like, how do I budget for that? How do I budget for a lifetime of giving? So that's pretty stunning. The third thing we're measuring, which actually has been a surprise to me, we're studying learning outcomes. And some people said up front that this probably wouldn't work and that students wouldn't take their education seriously because it, quote, feels like free tuition. And what we're actually seeing, and again, we're only 3 years into this, so the data is pretty limited, but what we're actually seeing is the opposite of that. These students are taking their education more seriously, not less. And we think the reason for that is because they're personally invested in a different kind of way. Like, they've made this covenant commitment to give something to Hope every year for the rest of their lives. So they've made this lifetime commitment. By the way, we don't specify an amount. We don't even suggest an amount. All they agree to is to give something. And the reason we leave it open-ended like that is we actually want it to feel like a true philanthropic gift. Whereas if we said, you commit to give something, and we suggest this amount, all of a sudden, to me, that starts to feel like a different flavor of a student loan bill. So we leave it totally open-ended. And the point is, in terms of learning outcomes, we're seeing higher GPAs from the students who are part of this than our typical students. We're seeing way higher retention. So we're seeing higher learning outcomes. which I think is really cool. The fourth thing we're studying is mental health. So there's a lot of research showing a negative correlation between high levels of student debt and negative mental well-being. We hope to be able to show the opposite, that because these students don't have any student debt, that there's a better sense of mental well-being. And then the last thing we're measuring is impact. And one of our theses is that without the burden of debt, these students will be freed up to pursue real impact in the world rather than chasing income to pay off their debt. So 5 things we're studying. It's a mix, as you can tell, of some qualitative things and some quantitative things, some short-term and some long-term things. But there's been we've learned a lot so far, and some of I think the generosity piece and the learning outcomes piece are the 2 that have surprised me the most so far.
I just want to put a pin on these students. I got to visit Hope in March of this year, and I spent some time with the cohort of these initial Hope Fellows. And it is just in the countenance and in the way they suddenly understand their vocation and even their own identity in the universe. There's something it's like the scandal of grace. It's the regenerative power of being given something that you can't believe you deserve. And how, I think we live in a society that often likes to say that's, you need to put skin in the game to really get invested, and I'm sure you get that critique from time to time. But what I just watched was students from all over the world, from all kinds of backgrounds, suddenly having an aha moment of, I am so humbled by this. I am clearly part of some broader fabric out there of goodwill and trust and belief, and I am now going to pursue medicine in that same spirit. I'm going to pursue, politics in that same spirit. So just like the literal character transformation, it was really fascinating to see in just a short period of time.
It's amazing, and one of the articles that was in your Gift Logic issue was this article on the intimacy of imbalance, I think by, help me with the name, Leah
Labresco Sargent. Yeah.
And what she describes in this article is, she says with her friends, she decided to, when they go out for dinner or drinks or whatever, they decided to stop splitting the bills. And rather what they do is one person agrees to just take the whole bill. And she talks about how it's gonna be uneven sometimes. Like I might order 2 drinks and Anne only orders 1. And Anne's picking up the bill. But what she talks about is you're entering into a relationship where there's purposeful and intentional imbalance. And if you believe that it's going to be a lifelong relationship, if you're trusting that our friendship is going to last over the course of our lifetime, then somehow, mysteriously, that imbalance will just work itself out. And that's what we're doing with our Hope students. We're just literally giving them a very expensive education up front, trusting that somehow over the course of their lifetime and ours, that imbalance will work itself out.
So I do want to just be a little realistic about the challenges. Institutional reform, or as I might put it, revolution, is not for the faint of heart, and it is a long road. So what internally, you can talk externally as well, as you've tried to do some of the fundraising and sell this vision, but internally specifically, what has been some of the pushback or skepticism you've received from faculty, administrators, who are experiencing their own institution have a kind of a at least more concrete version of their mission, but it feels like a new mission?
I don't think it's not a new mission. It's an application of our mission to solve I think the access to higher education is one of the most pressing societal problems we face. And I actually think it ought to be Christians leading the way on that. Like, it ought to be Christians who are pressing hardest on access to education. And so that's what we're trying to do. So I don't think there's any sense internally that this is at all inconsistent or somehow in competition with our mission. I think the biggest challenge is the very practical challenge, which is that this is a hard pivot from a very clear business model where we get tuition dollars from students and families and pay our bills that way to a business model that's literally based on faith. It's literally based on students giving after they graduate. This, by the way, this is how churches are funded. Obviously no one pays an entrance fee. Certainly no one would take out a loan to go to church. So we think that it holds up. But the transition is very, very hard, and it will basically, what we're trying to do is raise some money up front to kickstart that transition, so that we don't jeopardize the stability or financial health of the institution. So it's a long haul project to get there, and I think part of it is just this is a marathon, and you got to gear up for this. This is a journey that for us will probably take 10 to 15 years to pull off. So I think the internal dynamics are. This is going to be hard to pull off, and it's going to take a long time, so we're going to just need that steady grit-like focus over a long period of time.
So I want to close by maybe landing where I began and contextualizing how encouraging to my own work it has been to meet someone like you, Matt, which is when it comes to the good in our world today, and I'll go more specific and say when it comes to Christian social thought applied, which I think a lot of you are interested in, I find the practice so often ahead of the theory. And I don't necessarily mean the practice of individual Christians all living these beautiful Galatians 5 lives. I wish that were more true. I think we probably all wish that were more true. But there is something about people, whether they're social entrepreneurs, they're engaging in this kind of redemptive way, whether they're starting something new or they're reforming something existing in a given sector in a deeply public for society way. They're kind of just figuring it out, and whether they're embodying the Sermon on the Mount in particular reforms, but the articulation of that is it comes on the heels of practice. And what has been so fun about getting to know you is seeing that this very rich tradition that my little magazine is trying to apply to the present day, often at more sort of, say, middle highbrow conceptual levels, actually gives someone like you some fuel, at both perhaps in your own persuasion within your own institution, how you're selling the vision. So I'm not asking for a compliment here at all, but
You deserve a compliment.
I love this. I think this is where the game is played right now. These
Yeah.
often local, though not always local, sector-specific doers who are really pushing forward the magic redemptive work, and then how they interact with this higher order positive moral vision that can have some theological strain in it. What's the mutual enrichment of that relationship?
Yeah, man. Well, I think part of it foots back to what Cheryl was saying on the last panel, which is sometimes you got to just focus on the practice. Sometimes you got to just do something and maybe get off our soapboxes for a while and just try something. And in essence, that's kind of what we did. We just tried something. We had I think this is crazy. There's 4,000 colleges and universities in the United States. If we had all 4,000 presidents in the room, every single one of them, with the exception of the very elite institutions who have ginormous endowments, every single one of the presidents knows the business model is broken, and yet no one is doing anything about it. And what we decided is, how about instead of waiting for somebody else to solve our problem, let's just do it. So that's what we did. And then we stumbled on you, and we stumbled on Comment Magazine, and we stumbled on this gift logic issue that had so much beautiful language that helped us. In many ways, it felt divine because it was sort of affirming that there is theory behind this. This isn't just us trying to do something crazy.
And you're part of a historical story, and you're part of a long cloud of witnesses.
I think that's right. I think that's right. Yeah.
So thank you all so much. Please give Matt Scogin a hand of applause.